My name is Renata. I'm 41, and for the last 17 years, I've been what some people still like to call just a housewife. I used to bristle at that word, just, but over time, I've learnt to wear it like armor. Let people assume. Let them picture aprons and muffins and laundry baskets. They don't know what it really means to hold a household together, to run a life like a quiet, invisible machine that never gets to power down. I live in a quiet suburb just outside Denver. Not one of those picture-perfect neighborhoods with gleaming sidewalks and manicured lawns, but a lived-in kind of place. Our house is a 2-story colonial, white with pale green shutters that badly need repainting. The porch swings in the wind when it storms, and the mailbox leans just slightly to the left. It's not fancy, but it's home. My husband, David, works in logistics. He's up at 5:30 every morning, even on weekends. His alarm has become part of the atmosphere of the house, like the hum of the fridge or the distant sound of our neighbor's dog. He's not a talker, never has been. But he's steady, the kind of man who always makes sure the gas tank is full and the bills are paid. I love him for that. We have 2 daughters, Carmen, who's 17 and already too smart for the world, and Lena, who's 12 and still thinks baking cookies with me on Sundays is the best way to spend an afternoon. They're night and day, Carmen with her steel spine and restless spirit, Lena with her quiet joy and endless questions. Parenting them feels like walking 2 tightropes at once, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. People like to assume that because I don't work a 9 to 5, my life is easy, that I float through the days with nothing more pressing than meal planning and picking out seasonal throw pillows. They don't see the way I manage the entire family's medical history in my head, or how I budget down to the dollar, knowing exactly when the car's due for service, when Carmen's college application fees are scheduled to hit, or when Lena's dentist appointment overlaps with a PTA meeting. I don't miss office culture, not really. I had a career once, back before the girls were born, admin work mostly. I was organised, efficient. I liked it well enough. But when Carmen came along, something shifted. I wanted to be there. For everything. First steps, school pickups, sick days, scraped knees. I didn't want to be the mum who called in from work. I wanted to show up. Fully. Consistently. Even if it meant giving up a paycheck and a title. Still, it's not like I'm out of touch. I keep up with the news. I read consumer reports like they're thrillers. I know which pharmacies try to upsell and which brands quietly change their ingredients. I don't like being taken for a fool. There's a certain pride I take in being the one people in my circle come to when something breaks, be it a toaster, a bank statement, or a friendship. I fix things. That includes our car. We drive a 10-year-old CR-V. Not glamorous, but reliable. It's the kind of car that has grown with us, from rear-facing car seats to cross-state college visits. I know that cars quirks the way you know a long-time friend's habits, what that faint rattle under the dashboard means when the tyres are 2 pounds short of pressure just by how it pulls on the highway. David handles oil changes and wiper blades. I handle everything else, which is why, when the engine started making a strange clicking noise last month, something new, something sharp, I didn't panic. I made a note of it, cross-checked the service history. We were due for a checkup anyway. I scheduled an appointment at one of those large auto service chains. Bright signage, clean floors, polite receptionists with polished nails. We'd used them before for tyre rotation and basic stuff. They weren't cheap, but they were fast, and they had that brand name polish that made people feel safe. But as I stood at the kitchen counter that morning, sipping my coffee and looking over the appointment confirmation, I had a strange feeling I couldn't quite place. A kind of static behind the eyes. Nothing sharp, just a nudge. Something I'd learned not to ignore over the years. Carmen was rushing out the door with a granola bar in her mouth, Lena still half asleep at the table, and David already gone for the day. Just another Wednesday. But in the back of my mind, something tugged at me. It wasn't the car. Not exactly. It was what I might walk into without knowing what to look for. And I've learned, when something tugs like that, you follow the thread. You pay attention. You stay ready. Even when no one expects you to be. Especially then. The shop was one of those places designed to look like a corporate version of trust. blue and silver signage, slogans about transparency and honesty painted right on the walls. A spotless waiting room with charging ports, coffee pods, a TV softly humming some home improvement show. Everything carefully curated to make you feel like you're in good hands. I'd made the appointment online, Wednesday at 10:30 a.m. I brought the car in, gave them the key, and explained the issue. Metallic clicking under the hood, mostly noticeable at lower speeds. I'd already looked it up the night before. It could be a loose heat shield, maybe something with the serpentine belt or even a worn-out pulley. I wasn't going to pretend to be a mechanic, but I knew enough not to be dismissed. The service manager was a man in his early 30s, lean, sharp haircut, expensive watch that didn't match his uniform. His name tag said Chase, and everything about him seemed a little too polished. He smiled a lot, asked the right questions, nodded while tapping notes into a tablet, but his eyes didn't linger on mine for more than a second at a time, like he was running through a script. "We'll do a full diagnostic," he said smoothly. "Shouldn't take more than an hour. If anything serious comes up, I'll call you right away." I nodded and walked next door to the bookstore cafe, ordered a tea, set up my laptop, opened a blank document. I wasn't working on anything specific, just typing thoughts. I found that writing, even if it's disjointed, helps me settle the noise in my head. It gives shape to instinct. At 11:12, my phone buzzed. It was Chase. "Hey, Mrs. Morales," he said brightly. "So we took a look and it's not great. We're seeing signs of damage in the lower engine assembly, possibly a cracked oil pan. There's residue that suggests a slow leak, and we're worried that if you keep driving it, you'll seize the engine." My stomach tightened, not because I believed him, but because I'd heard this tone before. Confident, casual. "Just serious enough to make you feel irresponsible if you didn't act fast," he continued. "We can tow it to our certified site where they can break it down properly, give you an exact estimate, but ballpark, you're looking at around $2,800, maybe more." I didn't respond right away. I let the words settle. "That's surprising," I said, keeping my voice even. "Because there haven't been any signs of a leak. No oil spots in the driveway, no dashboard lights. And I check the dipstick every other fill-up, habit from my dad. Oil levels have been fine." There was a pause, brief, barely noticeable, but I heard it. "Well," he said, slower now, "these things can develop quickly." "I'll be over in 10 minutes, I said. "Don't touch anything until I get there." When I arrived, the car was still on the lift. I asked to see the damage myself. Chase hesitated, then motioned for a mechanic, young guy, tattoo sleeve, wouldn't meet my eye. They walked me back into the bay and pointed out a thin shin-dark smear on the undercarriage. "That's the leak," the mechanic mumbled. It looked off, too perfect, too fresh. The smear was a streak, not a drip pattern, like something had been wiped, not leaked. I crouched down and sniffed. Transmission fluid, not oil. I stood up slowly, wiped my hand on a rag, and turned to face them. "This isn't an oil leak," I said calmly. "It's ATF. My CRV is a manual." Silence. They didn't even try to explain. Chase blinked. The mechanic looked away. I felt a flicker of heat in my chest. Not rage, not yet, just confirmation. That tug I'd felt earlier that week was now something solid, something undeniable. "I'd like the car lowered," I said, "and I'll be taking it elsewhere for a second opinion." Back at the counter, I asked for a printed version of the diagnostic report. The receptionist printed it without a word. I paid nothing. They hadn't done anything billable yet. As I left, I glanced at the wall behind the counter. Framed customer satisfaction awards lined the space like a shield. All meaningless. When I got home, I called David and told him what had happened. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Do you want me to take it to a different shop?" "No," I said. "I'll handle it." And I meant that, because now I wasn't just suspicious, now I was sure, and I wasn't going to let it go. That night, after the girls had gone to bed and the house was quiet, I sat at the kitchen table with the printed diagnostic report in front of me and my laptop open. The kitchen light flickered slightly. It always did that when the dishwasher ran, but I ignored it. I was focused. I started with the report. The language was vague, overly technical in places, and oddly non-specific in others. It referenced visual signs of oil residue and possible internal damage, without naming exact components. No photos, no diagnostic codes, no compression readings. It was all smoke and mirrors, padded with jargon. Then I opened the website for the chain. Glossy graphics, pictures of smiling technicians, and promises of honesty, trust, and expertise. I scrolled to the bottom and found the customer support email, as well as a link labelled, "Have concerns? Let us know." I bookmarked both. Next, I opened a spreadsheet. Old habit. I'm a spreadsheet kind of person. I like things in rows and boxes like evidence in a courtroom. I made columns: date, service location, concern, resolution. Then I started digging through consumer forums, Better Business Bureau complaints, and Reddit threads. Within an hour, I had 11 entries. 11 separate customers, all with eerily similar stories. Was told I needed major engine work. Estimate over $2,000, went elsewhere, and it was a $60 fix. Told I had a cracked radiator. Mechanic friend found nothing. Over and over the same pattern. Large, scary diagnoses with high price tags, usually given to people who didn't push back. I didn't sleep much that night. My thoughts were sharp and alive, spinning in quiet circuits, but underneath the adrenaline was something calmer. Not panic, not anger, purpose. The next day, I took the car to a local independent mechanic, not a chain, just a small 3-bay shop run by a man named Roy, who'd been fixing cars in our town since before Carmen was born. I trusted him because he didn't try to dazzle anyone. He wore oil-stained jeans, he answered the phone himself, and he explained things like he assumed you were intelligent enough to understand them. Roy listened to my story without saying much. He nodded, frowned once, and said, "Leave it with me. I'll call you later." When he called that afternoon, his tone was half amusement, half disbelief. "There's nothing wrong with your engine," he said. "Heat shield had worked loose. 2 bolts in 15 minutes. No leak. Nothing's cracked. They must have been trying to scare you." I thanked him, paid in cash, and asked if he'd be willing to write up a simple statement. Just the facts. He said sure. With that, I had what I needed. Over the next 2 days, I filed a formal complaint with the corporate office of the auto repair chain, attaching both their report and Roy's. I wrote a detailed account of what had happened. I included photos I'd taken of the car, the undercarriage, the service bay, and screenshots of other customers' complaints. I was polite, precise, relentless. I also posted my experience calmly and clearly on several consumer review platforms. I didn't call names or get emotional. I just told the truth, backed up by documentation. The comments came quickly. Some people thanked me, some shared similar stories. A few said they'd had good experiences, but even those admitted it was hit or miss depending on the manager. Then I got a phone call, not from the local shop, from corporate. A woman named Vanessa introduced herself as a customer relations liaison. Her voice was careful, rehearsed, but not unfriendly. "We received your complaint, Mrs. Morales," she said. "It's being taken very seriously. We'd like to speak with you directly to better understand what happened." I told her I was happy to answer any questions, but I wouldn't be withdrawing anything I'd posted. No, she said quickly. "That's not what we're asking. We just want to resolve this appropriately." We scheduled a call for the following Monday. By then, I had already been contacted by 2 local news blogs that monitored consumer fraud. They'd seen my reviews. One of them asked if I'd be willing to go on record if they pursued a story. I said I'd consider it depending on how the company handled the issue. That Monday, I sat at the dining room table with my notes in front of me and David at my side while I spoke with Vanessa and someone else she introduced as legal counsel. They asked me to recount everything, which I did, clearly and without dramatics. I read directly from my notes. At the end of the call, there was a long pause. Then the lawyer spoke. "We're deeply sorry, Mrs. Morales. What you're describing is a breach of our standards and code of ethics. We'd like to offer compensation for your experience, and we'll be conducting a review of that location's practices immediately." I didn't expect what happened next. 2 days later, a courier arrived with a letter. Inside was a formal apology from the company's regional director, a certified check, and a note offering a complimentary upgrade through their corporate dealership. "We hope this gesture conveys how seriously we take your experience, sir," it read. It was more than I expected. Much more. But what mattered more than the check or the car was what came after. Because it wasn't over. Not for them. The thing that stuck with me the most, more than the insult of the fake repair or the ridiculous $2,800 estimate, was how confident they were I'd believe them. How certain they were that I, a woman in jeans and a fleece pullover, dropping off a family car between errands, wouldn't know the difference between transmission fluid and engine oil. Wouldn't question a word of what they said. Wouldn't sniff the undercarriage or read a service report like a deposition. They didn't just see a customer. They saw a target. And let's be honest, this kind of thing doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens because too many people have let it. Because too many women have been told to just nod along when someone in a uniform and a condescending voice explains things like they're reading from a children's book. I could still hear Chase's tone in my head. Calm, patronizing, just a hair too slick. The way he said catastrophic engine failure like it was a spell meant to freeze me in place. The little smile he gave when he handed me that printout, like he was doing me a favor. Like he expected me to gulp, grab my wallet, and thank him. And it made me wonder, how many other women had walked into that shop and been told the same story? How many had been pressured into signing off on unnecessary work? How many had quietly written the check because they didn't want to feel embarrassed, or difficult, or worse, hysterical? I thought back to when I'd crouched beneath the car and sniffed the residue for myself, the look on the mechanic's face, how quickly he averted his eyes. That was the moment he realized I wasn't playing the part he expected, that I wasn't just another mum who couldn't tell a heat shield from a head gasket. They had made one mistake. They underestimated me. And that's something I've learned people do a lot, especially when you're a woman who moves through the world quietly, calmly, without a lot of noise. People assume silence is ignorance. They confuse grace with passivity, but they don't see the books you've read, the hours you've spent listening and learning. They don't see the way your brain works like a ledger, tracking, measuring, remembering. They just see someone they can talk over. Until you make it clear that you've heard everything and you're not going anywhere. When the legal team sent the apology and compensation package, I wasn't surprised. I had laid it out for them. The proof, the contradictions, the witness testimony from Roy's garage. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't needed to. I let the facts do the shouting. But what truly changed the game, what rattled them, wasn't just that I figured it out. It was that I wasn't the only one. Because after I posted my story, more women started sharing theirs. Some messaged me directly. A few said they'd felt something was off, but hadn't had the nerve to challenge the diagnosis. One even said she'd paid over $3,000 for engine damage that a different shop later said was just a dirty sensor. She wrote, "I wish I'd done what you did. Thank you for saying it out loud." Those words, they meant more to me than the settlement check, because they proved this wasn't about a fluke or a misunderstanding. It was a pattern, and now it was out in the open. Eventually, word got around that several employees from that location had been fired. Not just the mechanic and Chase, but a third technician as well. Apparently, upper management discovered they had been running a quiet little scam, diagnosing false issues, inflating repair costs, and even reusing old parts during supposed replacements. The worst part? It had gone on for over a year. What finally brought it down wasn't an internal audit or a whistleblower from within. It was a mother of two with a background in admin work and a good memory for mechanical symptoms. It was a woman who knew the smell of transmission fluid, a woman who didn't yell, didn't threaten, didn't storm in with a lawyer, but who also didn't walk away. In the end, the company gave me more than a check. They gave me a new car, a sleek forest green hybrid SUV offered as a gesture of goodwill and apology. I accepted it not because I wanted something flashy, but because I wanted them to feel the cost of what they'd done. Because nothing says we were wrong. Quite like handing someone the keys to a vehicle you thought they couldn't understand. When I pulled into my driveway for the first time in that car, Lena ran out barefoot onto the pavement, squealing with excitement. Carmen looked up from her phone just long enough to smile and say, "You really did something, huh, Mum?" And I just laughed. Because yes, I did. I didn't set out to make a point. I wasn't looking for revenge or applause. I just wanted the truth to matter. But as weeks passed and the story made its quiet rounds, first among the moms at school drop-off, then in a local news blog, then through whispers at the grocery store, it became clear that something had shifted. Not just for me, but for other women too. One day I ran into a woman named Patricia at the library. We'd crossed paths before, PTA meetings, school plays, but we'd never really talked. That morning she approached me with a certain look in her eyes. It was the kind of look women give each other when they've both walked through the same fire and survived it. "I read your post," she said. "I went to the same shop last summer. They told me my brakes were shot and tried to charge me $1,900. I couldn't afford it, so I left. Turns out it was a loose sensor clip. $50. She paused. I didn't say anything. I was embarrassed. Thought maybe it was my fault. But when I read what happened to you, I don't know. Something changed. I'm not scared to speak up anymore." That stopped me cold, because that, right there, was the whole reason I'd gone public. Not for money, not for a free car, but so that someone else wouldn't sit at their kitchen table feeling small, wondering if they were the crazy one. So that someone else wouldn't have to second-guess their own intuition. Later that week, I was folding laundry when I got a call from Roy, the independent mechanic who'd helped me. He told me, in his usual no-nonsense tone, that 2 women had brought their cars to him in the last month, specifically because they'd read my story. One of them even showed up with a clipboard and a list of questions. "She knew her stuff," he said, half laughing. "Knew more than some techs I've hired." I smiled. "Good," I said. "That's how it should be." Because somewhere along the way, we got sold this idea that competence has a gender. That if you wear lipstick or carry a diaper bag, you must not know the difference between a fluid leak and a marketing ploy. That's a lie. And I'd had enough of it. When I pulled up to Carmen's school the following Friday in my new forest green SUV, I saw a group of dads standing by the pickup lane. One of them pointed toward the car and said, "Whoa, nice ride." I just smiled and said thanks. I didn't tell them how I got it, but I think maybe someday I will. Maybe someday I'll teach a little workshop at the community centre. Car basics for moms. Maybe I'll gather women in a room and say, you don't need to know everything, just enough to spot a lie. Maybe I'll show them how to check their fluids, read a diagnostic, ask a mechanic the right questions. Not because they have to do it themselves, but because knowledge is leverage, and leverage is power. For now, though, I live my quiet life. I drive my girls to practice, make dinner, refill the bird feeder, and keep a file folder labelled Documents, car scam case in the top drawer of my desk. I don't look at it often, but I like knowing it's there, because sometimes justice doesn't look like a courtroom or a headline. Sometimes it's a perfectly tuned engine, a clean set of bolts, a daughter who says, "You really did something, huh, Mum?" And sometimes justice looks like a woman no one saw coming who showed up with receipts and drove away with her head high and the truth right in her rearview mirror.